This year, you totally pulled the rug on fans and surprised us with probably the most requested hero, Dekaarde. Uh, how was the process of designing the fantasy of this hero? Do we make it like Avatar because he's old? Do we put him in the middle of team fights? That sort of thing.
Deckard was a really unique challenge for us to take on because of the fact that all our other heroes they're seasoned battlefield warriors. Even someone like Probius, Probes fight. They've achieved epic victories in StarCraft. But for Deckard, he really is kind of a narrator and a quest giver, and he just kind of guides you and helps you out, and he doesn't actually go and fight ever. So we had to think about how we would approach his abilities in a very different way. Kind of early on, one of the things we realized is that for a character like Deckard, really forceful, kind of destructive abilities don't make a lot of sense. Anytime we tried something like that, something, say magic-based, explosive magic or something, people just felt like, that's not something Deckard would do. So as we experimented, what we found is that abilities that were really kind of tactical and strategic, they fit him really well. Like we tried Healing Potion early on, and that was a great fit for him because you could think ahead and kind of put your potions down and place them where you think they'd go, and you'd be really rewarded for kind of reading the battlefield and making those good tactical decisions. And then when we tried other abilities, like with the Herodric Cube to slow enemies down, or kind of that Scroll of Sealing to kind of control an area, root enemies, set up your allies, that also ended up fitting him really well. Even for his heroics, they're kind of all about creating those situations where you can help your allies to shine, and that for Deckard really felt like it fit kind of his role and his fantasy.
How does Stay a While and Listen compares to ETC's Mosh Pit, and in what circumstances is it recommended to be used?
There definitely is some similarity between the two in that you can kind of lock down a lot of heroes at once with this. The biggest difference is that Stay a While and Listen is actually a sleep effect. So if the targets take any damage, it'll wake them up and they'll be able to get out, whereas with Mosh Pit, it'll actually keep the targets locked down even while they're taking damage. So the big key with Stay a While and Listen is that you want to kind of use it to set up these bigger plays where you're all kind of looking for that right moment, and maybe you will pair Deckard with people who do more like kind of delayed damage, skills that are kind of difficult to hit. So say, for example, you could Stay a While and Listen to lock everyone down, follow up with a Jaina Ring of Frost, and she'll have like time to really aim it and kind of hit everybody with that. So you get kind of more of those kind of combos. The other great thing with Stay a While is that it's got a pretty big wide area in front of him, so you can really use it to kind of help your team escape. For example, if you're running away, the enemy team's chasing you, you can throw out that Stay a While and buy your team time to get away. And then you can also run away after, and enemies will stay asleep for a little bit before they wake up.
Can you control which direction the Lornado goes, and what exactly does it do?
So the Lornado is vector targeted, so you do have control over which direction it goes. So the Lornado, it's kind of a consistent pushback effect. It's a little bit like Chen's Wandering Keg, in that as enemies touch it, it'll keep pushing them away. So it doesn't do damage to enemies, but if you can line it up to hit them continuously, it can displace them a lot. So as an example, if you create a situation where it's pushing them into a corner or someplace that they can't move, then it'll keep them locked down for quite a while. Or alternatively, if say they're behind a gate, for example, you can cast that behind the enemy gate, and it'll push them out into your team, which can be a really powerful effect.
What were the iteration adjustments you did for the Q, W, and E abilities, and how did you settle for the final ones?
It was a really fun process going through on Deckard's abilities. We started with Healing Potion, and honestly for that just kind of worked, and it was a really good win for us. His other two abilities actually went through quite a few changes. So the original Deckard kit, his W ability was kind of this buff effect. If you remember Nephilim Glory from Diablo 3, he could actually kind of cast this buff on an ally, and it would make their attacks do bonus damage and explode. And he still has that, by the way, on one of his level 13 talents, Ancient Blessings. But for his baseline kit, we then tried changing the W ability to a Herodric Cube, in that you would place it down initially on the ground, and he'd throw his other abilities into it, and that would change how they would work in different ways. We found that with the Herodric Cube being on the ground like that, it almost limited the decisions you made, because you would be just casting on that one point instead of targeting your abilities from moment to moment. So we ended up shifting it to be something that you would target at a location and it would just go off. And then we used the gem talents to let you modify how the cube would function at any given time. For his E ability, we originally had that as Identify. So if you remember, like Diablo 3, he identifies your items, right? So we wanted to play off of that. So he would channel on an enemy hero, and that would reveal them. It would reduce their armor. It sounded like a fun idea on paper. When we tried it out, it was actually kind of weird because channeling in our game, it's kind of this big risk to stand there and channel on a target, and you really want a big impactful reward out of that. But for Dекard, it didn't, like I mentioned earlier, it didn't make sense for him to, say, do something really destructive off of a channel. So it just kind of didn't fit his kit the way we wanted to go. We replaced that with what you saw as his Scroll of Sealing, which was this kind of delayed, like he'd draw out, the scroll and wrap around enemies like that, which nicely fell into that tactical gameplay style where, he can deny an area to keep enemies away, or he can get a big root and set up a combo for his allies. It ended up being a much better fit for him. Heroics-wise, Stay a While. We tried that pretty early, and it worked out for him really well. We didn't actually start with Lornado, though. That came in a little bit later. So we initially had in there, I think it was like Angelic Seal or something. We thought, he's a Heraldric mage. He gets along with the angels. He could do some angelic magic. But we kind of got that same feedback of, this doesn't quite feel like Dekard, but we knew we wanted something disruptive. So the next thing we tried is, we called it the End Times. And Dekard would prophesize a meteor strike, kind of like the cinematic, if you remember that. And it would come down at his location and knock enemies away, and he'd emerge unharmed from a town portal a second later. Mystery solved, right? Now, that one was actually pretty cool, but because the meteor came down on Dekard, it made him want to run into the enemy team, which isn't exactly what you want, right? So we went, all right, what's another way that we can get that feel without, having the Dekard charging in to the battle? And that's where we looked at kind of the old April Fool's stuff that Diablo 3 did for the Archivist class, and we saw Lornado, and we went, oh man, we could do something really cool with that. So we gave the Lornado a try, gave it that vector targeted push effect, and it just immediately felt great, and we're like, okay, we've got a winner here. This stands up to Stay a While. It's good.
Can you explain some of the level 1 to 20 talents, the most cool ones?
So exciting talents. Right out the gate, one of my favorites is the Ruby talent for Heraldric Cube. So you put this in, when it hits an enemy hero, a few small healing potions pop out. This is per hero, though, so if you hit the entire enemy team with a Ruby enhanced Heraldric Cube, a shower of tiny healing potions comes out, and it's just great. Yeah, it's such a cool moment. Let's see what else. So I mentioned earlier that Ancient Blessings talent. We changed it to be on his trait, and you activate it, and for a short time, all your nearby allies get that buff effect that makes their attacks do explosions and heal them, and it's just kind of that great moment, like you picked up a golden glove in a Nephilim Rift, right, and just light show everywhere. We also did this really fun one where I think we called it Heraldric Staff, and it would make his attacks stun, so just every 5 seconds or so, Dekard can just walk up and bonk you over the head with his staff and stun you for a little while. And then the last one I'll throw out there is the Bottomless Flask talent. That was one that was a little crazy, but we wanted to try it, and I'm so glad it worked out because it's really cool you throw down your potion, it gets picked up. A few seconds later, the potion's back again. You can throw that under, say, a Sergeant Hammer while she's sieged up, and they'll just keep refilling, and she'll just keep shooting, and it's great.
Is Dekard Cain considered a support hero, or is he like Karasim?
I'd say that he's very much a healer, very much a straight-up support hero. I mentioned earlier, again, the whole force versus kind of tactical feel. For Dekard, it was a big value. We didn't want him dealing too much damage, so we really kind of pushed him into that role where he's doing a lot of healing and bringing a lot of utility to help his team out, but not really damaging enemies too much himself.
Are we going to see heroes like Kim Varian this year or the next? He's kind of lonely in the filter category.
So... Multi-class with Varian was a really cool experiment. I think we would be open to doing it again. The big thing, though, is that when we're considering a new hero, we're thinking about, things that we really need to bring to the game in terms of balancing out roles or, universes or any number of things. With multi-class, it's more of a, if we see a really cool opportunity to do it, we will, but, we don't necessarily need to go, hey, we really have to have, a multi-class to balance out the roster this year kind of thing. So we're open to the idea, but, we don't have an exact timeline of when that might happen again.
How those gems work and how do you choose them?
So each of Dekard's gems are individual talents. You can choose or not choose any one of them. You also have the option to choose all of them. With each one, you can only use one gem per cast, so you do have to kind of choose the right gem for the situation. But with each cast of your Herodric Cube, you're free to kind of switch it up and pick a different gem. We did initially have it to where you could throw all the gems in there at once, which was pretty crazy. And we actually didn't mind the effect. The biggest problem that created is that you felt like you would always use every gem on every cast, so you weren't really making a decision anymore. It was just, piano decker, just run your fingers right down the keyboard. And we really wanted it to be that, hey, I'm thinking about my cube and how I use it and which gem I need for the situation. So that's why we now have it to where you have to pick which gem you're using each time.
Currently, we have a terrifying mobility meta with Genji, Diva, and Tracer. How can poor Kane and his arthritis hope to counter that mobility?
So the thing with mobility is that it is a form of power, but it's one of many forms of power. As an example, you'll see in HGC right now heroes like Gul'dan and Jaina, who themselves aren't that mobile, but are still really effective. So the thing with mobility is more, not so much even a balance thing as just a kind of a feel thing, right? Like, how does it feel to play against those characters? And that side of it is something we're keeping an eye on. But for Dекard, at least in our testing, it definitely feels like he holds up just as well as any of our other supports kind of in the current environment, especially because he can be really clever with those healing potion setups. If an ally's getting chased, whether it's by Tracer or someone else, they can run to his potions and, get healed up, and that can be a big moment to turn the fight around.
How do you balance Kane so that he's not OP or too fragile?
So in Dekard Kane's case, the big one definitely was kind of his survivability. Because he's got these healing potions, he can throw them out pretty often. He's got cooldown reduction from being near his allies. You'd get this kind of thing where he'd run away and he'd just be pressing Alt-Q and just dropping the potions on top of himself. So there was a very delicate balance process of getting it to where he could cast potions often enough to provide effective healing, but not feel like he was immortal. We definitely had a few playtests where it was just like, I can't kill Dekard, we've got 3 people on him. But our balance team, they do a great job, and I feel like they ended up in a place where Dekard feels really powerful, but not, the indestructible Dekard Kane.
When is Dekard Kane expected to hit the PTR? Do you have an approximate?
So he will be hitting the PTR very soon here in the next couple of weeks. So players will be able to get their hands on him very soon.
This year we have gotten very popular and long requested heroes so far: Kel'Thuzad, Suljin, Garage. Is that something we can expect looking forward to the rest of the year? Surprises in the horizon?
So we take a lot of factors into account when we decide which heroes to do. Community feedback is definitely one of those. So we really are watching out for what our players excited for, as well as what we're excited for, which honestly a lot of the time lines up, because we're players as well and we're excited about a lot of those same characters. So personally, I'm really excited for what we've got coming, and we're looking forward to being able to talk more about that in the future.
With characters from StarCraft, Diablo, World of Warcraft have a huge impact on the new storyline. How and can you describe this new lore content coming in April?
So a lot of the lore that we're going to be exploring is really more inward facing on the stories of the Nexus and what's going on in it. So while there are all of these characters and worlds that are being brought into the Nexus, we're really going to be focusing on, and at least initially, we're starting with the Raven Lord, who's the realm lord that oversees Ravencourt, which is the zone that, or the realm that has Haunted Mines and Cursed Hollow and Towers of Doom are all taking place on that world. So while the characters from our other games will be involved in the stories somewhat, it'll be more peripheral since we're really focusing more on the story of the Nexus itself and why we're all here fighting.
Is this coming lore content exclusively players versus AI and brawls, or what is your focus and what will this content look like in the game?
Players have seen the last couple of years that we have a lot of like various mediums coming out talking about the game all the time. So sometimes it's cinematic, sometimes it might be things that are taking place actual in-game, the flavor text that we write for characters or for skins or mounts. Like there's a lot of places that we talk about things right now. So moving forward, what we'd like to do is take every opportunity, like whenever we're talking about the game, try to be weaving in some components of this lore as well. So for example, when the next cinematic comes out for something in the game, it will be touching on the lore components. When a next theme skin drop comes out, it may be touching on the lore components as well. So kind of look for every time we touch things in game and out of game, we'll be talking about it. And again, the first thing will be a comic that'll be coming out later on this month, and that focuses on the Raven Lord.
Are we going to see heroes from the Nexus universe, like there are heroes from the other universes? It could be the Raven lore. It could be one we have never heard of before.
We have a really big list right now of heroes from all of the Blizzard universes that are kind of dying to get into the Nexus. But part of the fun of us really starting to dig into this story of what's going on in this world is that it opens those kind of doors. So no plans right now for that, but it definitely is a possibility.
I think we have almost all of World of Warcraft playable races represented in Heroes, except one. Any plans to introduce Draenei into Heroes of the Storm at some point?
I mean, that'd be cool to do, right? That's actually, I mentioned earlier, right? We consider a lot of different factors of things that we're trying to hit and balance out and, get all those things that different players are excited about into the game. And definitely those different backgrounds, those different races are things that we consider as well when we're deciding, hey, which hero should we be doing next? So it could definitely happen.
We had a StarCraft expansion and a Diablo expansion. Suddenly we got 2 Overwatch maps and a wave of Overwatch heroes without a proper expansion. Was there a philosophy change in how new content is released? Will we ever get a Warcraft expansion, for example?
So a lot of things go into like how we align content. A lot of times we're off working on content for a very long time, and sometimes things just happen to line up with other games, and sometimes they don't. Usually we're really trying to just do what's best for our game at any given moment in time. So you may see things that do line up in the future. Other things might be completely disconnected, but the most important thing to us is that we're bringing really cool content into the game all the time, and I think we've been doing an awesome job of that. Keep at it.
Have you discussed ways to increase the amount of statistics visible to players in the client, like hot logs or better?
This is definitely a game where stats are something that are really important to players, and they're important to us as well. We've heard a lot of feedback about this, and it's something that we've talked about a lot. We've done some actual work on it this year where on our HGC website for the Heroes Global Championship, our esports, there's a lot more statistics that are exposed there for the teams and about their games that are in almost real time now as their games are being played. Some of that work kind of paves the way for some things that we'd like to do in the future. I don't have any specific timelines right now for that, but we actually understand the desire, and it's something that's important to us as well. We'll just have to see when we have the time to get to it.
Are there more UI and system upgrades coming in the pipeline after the success of Heroes 2.0?
Heroes is all about evolution and improvement, so there are always things that we're going to go and keep touching the existing systems in the game to make them better, but there are also new things that we want to add as well. So I don't have announcements again on anything specific right now, but know that the team is constantly working on new things, and pretty much every patch we bring you small to medium things, and we will like to align to large things as well in time.
Who is Dekaarde good to play with and weak against?
So for Dekaarde, starting out with kind of the counters, because of the fact that he does like to kind of create these areas where he's got healing potions stocked up, you can to some extent take advantage of that. Enemies can see where the potions are. So for example, you can see an enemy who's injured walking to go pick up a potion, and you can use skill shots and line them up with that. So heroes who have kind of bigger delayed damage that they have access to, say for example maybe a Kael'thas with a flame strike, can take advantage of that and be like, oh, you want to go pick up that potion? All right, here, have a flame strike. And then on the flip side, for heroes he pairs well with is anyone who kind of has big delayed damage abilities as well. Like I mentioned earlier, Jaina with the Ring of Frost is a great combo with Stay a While and Listen. Diva with the talent that increases the explosion timer on the mech and the damage lines up pretty well with the sleep timer on Stay a While if Dekaarde gets the full channel off. So that can be a really devastating moment if you can pull it off. Also, kind of the Sergeant Hammer with the Bottomless Flask, that's a super fun combination to do. Or any hero that has kind of a small burst of mobility. So like you saw in the Spotlight, Artanis swapping into the potions. Greymane can do a little quick dash into there. Just things that allow you to kind of see those potions and move over to grab them if they happen to be near you.
Thank you for the interview. I had a lot of fun playing Dekaarde. I played for like 28 minutes. Oh my god, it is... I want to play him right now.
So happy to hear that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
What secret shall we uncover?